When Grace first hired Laura, she was so grateful. Finally, someone to help me with groceries and laundry, she'd thought. Laura had arrived in crisp scrubs and a practiced smile. But kindness was a courtesy Laura spent recklessly. A requested errand became a 2-hour personal shopping spree. Folding laundry turned into gossip sessions where Laura demanded confessions of Grace's private affairs. One afternoon, Grace caught her caretaker sneaking extra cash from her purse. "Oh, I thought it was for compensation," Laura had shrugged, her apology as hollow as the promise she'd made to respect boundaries. From that day on, Grace learned, a hired helper without integrity is not someone you owe compassion, she's someone you politely fire. Miles away in California lived her eldest grandchild, Jenna, always on speakerphone with a rehearsed sob story. "My car broke down again, Grandma." Or "Tuition's more expensive than we thought." Grace sent money always out of love, but the guilt calls only escalated. Jenna's demands bled into her dreams. Bills arrived just as her own rent check was due. It was Easter Sunday when Grace realized the final straw. Jenna called in tears, saying she wouldn't be able to visit because "Grandma, you don't love me enough." Grace's heart cracked and then healed with stubborn resolve. She wrote a letter. "I love you, but I cannot give you more than I can afford. Please find your own way." No kindness at her expense, she decided. Boundaries, she discovered, are also acts of love. In her retirement community, Mrs. Wilkins was known as the authority on everyone else's business. No good deed was too small to escape her scorn. When Grace baked cookies for the monthly game night, Mrs. Wilkins sniffed, "Too sweet or to watch your blood sugar." When Grace wore a cheerful scarf, Mrs. Wilkins sighed, "Does that colour even suit you?" Grace had once offered her a place in her sunlit garden to grow her beloved roses. Mrs. Wilkins threw a frostier glare than the winter wind. Kindness shouldn't be wasted on someone whose mission is to diminish others. Grace learned that generosity toward a perpetual fault finder only invites more criticism, so she saved her rose bed for neighbors who smiled back. There was Harold, the guy who showed up whenever he thought a free meal or a ride to the doctor's was on offer. Harold never volunteered when Grace needed help lifting a box or pushing her walker. His help only appeared when her fridge needed stocking or her car needed washing. Finally, there was Robert, the old high school buddy who called every other day to reminisce. "Remember when we trashed the disco club?" he'd say, then dominate the conversation for an hour, laughing at his own stories. When Grace tried steering talk toward how she'd been traveling or volunteering, Robert cut her off. "Oh, Grace, those aren't worth mentioning. Let me tell you about the glory days." At first, Grace felt flattered until she realized Robert's nostalgia was a cage. She yearned to share her current passions, watercolor painting, bird watching, her new book club. But Robert's self-absorption swallowed every syllable. Grace finally sent him a gentle note. "I treasure our memories, but I wish for mutual conversation. If you can't listen, I'll have to step back." As the sun climbed higher, Grace sipped her now lukewarm tea and smiled. She had cut ties or at least established firm boundaries with those 5 characters. She still greeted Laura politely at the front gate, but the door stayed firmly shut on personal space. She forwarded Jenna's calls to voicemail. She waved to Mrs. Wilkins from across the courtyard, but never planted another rose for her. Harold got a friendly nod at the supermarket. Robert received postcards instead of long phone calls. Grace's world grew quieter, softer, more centered on the people who truly appreciated her, her knitting circle, her book club friends, the sweet mail carrier who never asked for more than a thank you. In old age, kindness is precious, and, Grace realized, protecting your peace sometimes means knowing exactly when not to be kind. Just as Grace thought she'd seen it all, along came Marcy, the neighbor whose life was a perpetual soap opera. Marcy called every morning with a new crisis. Her pet parakeet had run away, her grandson refused to eat his vegetables, or her hairstylist double-booked her for 2 weddings. Each call was an emotional avalanche, and Grace found herself swept away by guilt whenever she hesitated to answer. One afternoon, Marcy burst through the screen door, mascara streaked from tears. "Grace, you have to help me, Tom's gone missing again," she wailed. Grace offered her a seat and a tissue, genuinely concerned, until Marcy pulled out her phone to film Grace for a live stream update. "The dear, sweet Mrs. Whitman is going to help find Tom," she chirped, turning the whole thing into content for her followers. Grace felt her chest tighten. She realized that Marcy didn't really want help. She wanted an audience and a moment in the spotlight. So she smiled, patted Marcy's hand, and gently closed the door. "I'm sorry you're worried," she said quietly, "but I'm not the best person for this. I hope you find Tom soon." No explanation, no guilt trip to follow. Marcy stood on the porch, camera dangling from her wrist, and watched Grace walk away. As the door clicked shut, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years: relief. A few weeks later, Grace's lifelong friend, Hattie, asked to borrow her vintage china set for a garden party. Grace agreed after all. Hattie had never let her down. But when Grace went to retrieve the dishes a month later, she found her treasured heirlooms replaced by chipped plates and mismatched cups. Hattie promised to replace them, but never did. That evening, Grace sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, the chipped teacup before her. She realized that kindness without accountability meant her generosity was being eroded. After Harold lingered too long at her kitchen table, Grace wrote a short note. Quietly said, "Dear Hattie, I'm going out. I've enjoyed sharing my china with you, but I need it back in good condition." Muttering that he was just trying to help, it dawned on Grace that generosity toward a linked door and self-sabotage. Unburdened. Free yourself from those who harvest your goodwill without planting seeds in return. The table was set with her beautiful china, each plate sparkling. Laughter echoed through the screened porch as they shared stories, encouraged each other's passions, and celebrated the simple blessing of good company. As she poured another cup of tea for Reverend Thomas, Grace looked around and thought, "This is what peace feels like, not the hollow calm that comes from avoiding everyone, but the warm serenity born of wise choices, of knowing exactly who deserves your kindness and when to say, 'No, thank you.'" In the golden years, Grace discovered, true happiness wasn't about being kind to everyone. It was about being kind to the right ones, and that made all the difference. One rainy afternoon in early November, as golden leaves swirled around the porch, Grace heard a gentle knock at her front gate. It was Jenna, hair tucked under a hoodie, eyes soft and uncertain. She wasn't here for money. She wasn't on the phone. She stood there, vulnerable and quiet. "I don't want anything," she said. I missed you." Grace stood still for a moment, her heart a mix of caution and compassion. She gestured to the swing on the porch tee. She asked, not with excitement but with openness. They sat in silence for a while, the rain tapping rhythmically on the roof.